Okay, so today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about how to prep a game in Roll20 when you may not have the online materials for it. You might be using a book because it's one that hasn't been published yet for use on Roll20, or you already had the book and you don't want to buy it again because that's money. And in my case, it just made it easy to justify that I could have this book, not re-buy it, even though this one happens not to be available. We're doing Out of the Abyss. And I could use that money that I saved to maybe get tokens or buy other materials. Now, in this case, I did buy online materials so that I'd have high quality access to the maps, but otherwise I'm working with what I got. So, I am working on Out of the Abyss. I just made a little default place for my players to live when we're not in a map, but I'll show you a little bit about what I've already set up and prepped. The first thing I usually work on are my tokens for all my creatures. So I have a PCs section, I have where the NPCs go, and then in alphabetical order I have kind of everything they'll run into. Now you'll notice there's a lot of different art styles in here. It's because I'm drawing from various free packs and purchased packs to make this work. But for the size maps they use and everything, all of these art styles work just fine. Alright, so let's start with the beginning of the adventure. So what I've basically done is copied the sections that are in the book proper. So there is the player-facing description that you read, and then the GM notes on what's there. And I've done that for every main section that's outlined in the book. I've made some adjustments based on how I run the game, and I have added links here. Now in Roll20 you can do that by just adding hard brackets around anything. That one happens to be a D&D Beyond link because these are public-facing monsters, which is fine. But for most of the maps I've made sure to do it so that it reflects the creatures that are in there. Like this one is an internal link, which gives me their character sheet in here. Now let's talk a little bit about making characters when you don't have the published materials. The published materials make it really nice because it gives you the characters that are already there. I'm going to go ahead and go to my enemies section here. But when you're doing it by hand, there's a couple things you want to rely on. One is the compendium. If the compendium already exists for that monster, you can drag it in. So for example, I can look here and see if there is one for, let's see, one that's already in here, a deep gnome for example. And you can look and it's there. Now if this is there, that means that you can create a character. And I've already done deep gnome, but we'll do it as an example. Save it, go to the character sheet, drag and drop. Makes it very easy. Now, for a lot of the monsters we're dealing with, though, that is not the case. So, for example, if I get my little Ayag in there, well, that one exists too, so that makes it very easy. I think if we're going to do... So there's only basic drow in here. You'll notice that for our campaign, if I go down over here, thank you. We also need Drow Elite, and they don't show up in the list. So in that case, when you have your stuff open, you're going to be manually putting all this information in. So the gear is always how you make adjustments to settings in Roll20. The top part is going to be all their main stats and your settings for them. So I always like querying advantage. The rest of these are fine for me, and I always add my tiebreaker. But however you like to run your game is fine. Anything you don't fill in here doesn't show up on the NPC card. So this is what the NPC card looks like. It's a much more streamlined version of the regular character sheet so that it's easy to get to things, and everything's clickable so that you can easily cast spells or perform attacks, and those go into the rolls. So again, I put query advantage, so it asks if they have advantage or disadvantage. You submit, and it shows up over here. So the attack is 20, and if that hits, you just mouse over and it'll explain what's going on there for that. So it's very straightforward. I like my players to manually roll their damage because they feel more interactive that way. If you didn't want this to be an NPC, you just uncheck this box and it turns it into a regular player type character sheet that gives you more details. Alright, so that one we don't need right now, so we'll have that go away. Now, one of the first things that I do, you notice I have a lot of critters already set up here. I've only prepared through from the Durgar city, really. So I am through Grackelstug right here, including the Whirlstone tunnels. Let me show you a little bit of how I set that up. So I do have a pro account, so I can do dynamic lighting. That's the main thing that my characters or my players really like to play with in the game. So for example, here's the Velkenvelv map. It does take a second to load. Some of these are pretty big. And I'll show you a little bit about what I've set up here. So the standard map does show this whole thing. This isn't the best map to use as a player map because it's pretty small and there's not a lot of room, but I have set it up that way so this is usable for holding everyone. So in prison right now I have all the NPCs plus the characters actually made his character already. We're pretty far out from the start of this game. I'm doing a lot of early prep. And then all I did is for each of the rooms as it described what's there, I put those tokens in place so that they're ready to go. And you'll notice I have hit points and AC already set up in the bars. Now, so I have some guards, I have some treasure chests. You'll notice over here in the GM view, so players don't see this, I've told myself what's on each level. So there's a treasure chest on 8, a treasure chest on 7, and then on the 6, which is what the room number is for this level, I have a spider statue, Asha, and a drow. I have my demons running around doing their thing, and then again I've just kind of set everything up. Another thing I like to do with the maps, because a lot of times these are drawn very empty, is I will go into the tokens and I will add objects that kind of show what the room is for. So in this case, this is their dining hall, so I've put some stuff in there. It's also a place where characters can pick up food rations, so I wanted to make sure it looked like there was food available. And both of these rooms have a number of chests, so if I put a chest token in the room, it makes it really clear to the players when they're looking in there that that's what's going on. Now the nice thing about this, if you're using dynamic lighting, so I custom created, and I'll show you that layer, dynamic lighting blockers all the way around the rooms. And then for their doors, I do doors in orange. That's what the published adventures do as well, because it's easy to find those and remove them when they open a door. But I made this one bars so they could see through to the outside. Now dynamic lighting is pretty cool because it gives them line of sight, and I think it makes things a little bit more dramatic. So for example, if you highlight a character that you've given sight and do Control L, it gives you their line of sight. So those bars I put on there gives them kind of a muted view of what's going on. And you can see that he can barely see in the distance that there's something going on with demons, and he definitely can't see anyone outside. So until they leave this room, they don't know what they might run into without using their applicable skills, like doing a listen check, going all the way to the front of the bars to maybe get a better view of what's going on outside. Now they can't see into this building across the way because it has a door, so we'd have to remove that door or open that door for them to have a view of what's there. And that just makes it better for exploring. If you have a big boss in a section, having a door means that they don't see it before you're ready for them to see it. All right, so let me get out of that view. So I've done that for Velkenvelv, which is the smaller map. That's really just them getting their stuff back, hopefully, and getting out through one of these tunnel exits. From there, they start traveling. So there's this Into Darkness section. Now, when I'm playing an at-home game, we do the random encounter rolls at the table because it's something that's relatively easy to do. I just grab a few minis, throw them on the map based on what they roll. But because I have to do this through Roll20 now, because we do have one off-site player in our campaign, what I've done is pre-rolled 40 days of travel in case they need it. And that sounds like a lot, but it goes pretty quick. I just roll my d20s and see if anything happens, and I make myself notes. So for this 10-day of travel, days 1 through 3 didn't have any encounters. Day 4 didn't have an encounter during the day, but it does have encounters at night. And I've given myself notes for what they hear, what they see. I am an over-prepper, that's for sure, but it's something I enjoy doing. And I've, again, linked to the characters they run into, so I have their stats available. Now, I have made myself notes about which map this occurs on. So this is one of the ways that I prep, is there aren't maps given to you for their travel sections. So what I've done is I've taken one of the free maps, one of the maps that you can add in a pro pack. That's a road on the surface. And what I've done to it is through the dynamic lighting, I've created walls, so it's a tunnel. That's pretty much all I did. So I made one of those for one that's completely dark, one that has glowing fungi and our Fairzress, our glowing spooky particles, and then one that has stalactites and stalagmites in it just to give some variety. So for my dark tunnel, let me go back to my objects layer. The first encounter they can run into in that is a jelly. And then what I have here on the GM layer, so players can't see it, plus it's outside of the wall, so they wouldn't see it anyway, I have the other encounters that they could run into at later times. So I've got some orcs, a carrion crawler, some spore servants, an umber hulk, etc. all ready to go. So all I have to do if they run into that encounter is go to my GM layer, grab it, bring it in, and move it to the token layer, and it appears. And that just makes it easier for me where they're not waiting while I'm going to a different place to grab those tokens and bring them over. And so that's just some pre-prep I can do to make that a lot faster. So again, got our lighter tunnels. They run into a drow spy as one of the first things they do. And then in my stalactites one, the main thing they run into here are these fire beetles, as well as the sign, the drow sign. That's a warning sign for demons. I just copied that and put it on one of the rocks there so I can describe what they run into, and it actually shows up on the map. So that makes that easier, and I've done that again for a few different 10 days. So what I did was I looked at the travel times thing. I've made changes based on if they're traveling fast or slow, how long that is. I took the farthest one and I made sure I had enough days to cover that in travel. It's pretty much all I did. So even if they choose to go to the craziest location from where they're starting, I have all the travel time pre-prepped for that. I also did the first 2 of the between cities encounters, so I have Silken Paths on there. And again, this one doesn't have a map, so all I did was take some web tokens and create something that looks webby. And again, I put their first encounter in here, and then in the GM layer, it's mostly spiders, but there's a spectator and some other things. I prepped those other tokens as well. Some dark mantles down here. And that's pretty much what I did. I did the hook horror layer as well, made sure I had that ready to go. I do have that map as well in here. This one takes a little longer to load. I'll talk a little bit more about dynamic lighting as well. So in the Underdark, most of the areas they go to are dark, or there's some sort of glowing fungi. And you can easily add those kind of lights. I like doing it in the dynamic lighting layer directly. So in this map, it said it was all dark, but it did note that the gnolls had a camp in a certain area. So all I did over here was I added a fire and I gave that light. So I'll give you a map that has that a little bit better. We'll go to the Whirlstone tunnels. For example, in the Whirlstone tunnels, there's this oven here, which I decided should have light. So I just added a little fire token on my light layer, and in advanced, I gave it a light radius that players can see. All these red dots are where I've added that mysterious Ferris glow, and I made that dim lighting. So the way I did that was I said this is how far it emits light, and it starts being dim right away at 1. Otherwise, you'll have an area of bright light, and then it turns into dim light later on in that radius. So that makes it really easy to set that as dim light. So if the players are casting light, they'll still get a brighter area where they have light cast, which makes it nice. So that makes it easy to do lighting. You'll notice again, I have walls set up for the dynamic lighting so they have blocked line of sight to certain areas. And I do outside of the walls when it's a cavern, the irregular shape, this makes it easier where they can still put their characters against the wall without being blocked by that line. Because if you restrict movement in areas based on where this line of sight is, having the line right here means their mini doesn't fit in that space. So just something to be aware of. If you have straight walls in a dungeon, then you can just do it on the walls and it's not as big of a deal. Also doing it slightly outside at least lets them see where the border of the actual wall is because they can see that part of the art. It's not blocked by the wall. And again, orange for doors because I can easily select those and remove them as needed. And then the other thing I've done on this page in particular, actually I'll show you, objects and tokens. This item right here can be used to create a gas cloud, basically. And so in my GM layer, I've already put the cloud in the correct size that it is in there, and it can be moved around as necessary based on what they're doing with it, but I have that ready to go. So if I say a Dorgar activates it, all I have to do is move it to my token layer so my players can see it and hopefully avoid it if they're not already in that space. Alright, next time we're going to talk a little bit about, well, I'll walk you through how I actually start a new area. So Neverlight Grove, the only thing I've prepared is putting in the text about what they can run into as they're approaching it. I haven't started any other prep for that. So next time I'll go through how from scratch I start putting those things together. The only thing I've put in the maps is the actual full map, which I have added sub-squares into because each of these squares is actually about 10 feet or so. So I've changed it so that they can move around their minis at the correct size in comparison to the map. But that's pretty much it. So we have a lot of prep to do. So I will do that next time.